Valkyria Chronicles was a great game. Look up a list of good JRPGs, and there's a decent chance it'll be on there, and for good reason. Its story and characters were pretty good, it had these lovely watercolor-esque graphics, and its strategy shooter mixed gameplay was really fun. It's not hard to see why it got sequels, but you may not be as familiar with them. You may have heard that the second game was bad and that the third game never got an English translation, but there's so much more to talk about with these entries, and they're definitely worth playing. Valkyria Chronicles 2 and 3 would be released on the PSP, a bit of a downgrade given the original was a PS3 title. This is reportedly because the first game was a critical success, but wasn't a financial one, or at least not as big of one as they wanted. This would inspire a cheaper development cycle. So in 2010, Valkyria Chronicles 2 would release to positive reception, but its lackluster sales caused the third game to not even get released outside of Japan when it came out in 2011. This was a travesty, as Valkyria Chronicles 3 isn't just a great game, it's possibly the best game on the PSP. Now that might sound like a big claim, but I'm serious, it's that good. There are people who consider this lowly PSP game to be equal to the PS3 original. If Valkyria Chronicles 2 can be seen near the top spot on some people's lists, then this massive improvement is definitely a contender for number 1. So if I have your attention, let's take a look at a fantastic JRPG that many haven't played. But first, a quick tangent. The original version of this video was actually going to be a double feature of Valkyria Chronicles 2 and 3, but as I wrote it, I felt bad for 2 as putting it beside 3, which was able to learn from its mistakes, kinda felt like bullying it. That being said, if all you've heard about is that it's worse than the original game, that's not wrong, but being worse than a 9 out of 10 still gives you room to be a solid 7.5. It did a great job of adapting the series systems to the PSP. It introduced new class ideas and tank customization. It got rid of the horde of expendable units with little character for a more focused group with actual personalities and backstories. Despite its flaws, of which there are a few, it did a lot right that I have to give it credit for. Put simply, Valkyria Chronicles 2 walked so Valkyria Chronicles 3 could run. Speaking of, let's talk about playing Valkyria Chronicles 3. As the game never got a worldwide release, it wasn't available in English. That changed thanks to fan translation. Now I will mention the translation isn't perfect. They didn't translate all of it, by which I mean things like the game's encyclopedia entries that not many people were likely to read. There's also the occasional typo or grammar error, or text not fitting into the text box properly. It can be a little rough at points, but the main story and character missions are all perfectly understandable. I can only get so mad at a free translation that makes an otherwise incomprehensible game playable by English speakers, so thank you fan translators. But now let's get to the main topic, and boy is the story here a highlight. The plot of Valkyria Chronicles 3 takes place at the same time as the original game, sometimes intersecting. If you don't remember, Valkyria Chronicles is set on the continent of Europa, basically a stand-in for Europe. You have the Atlantic Federation in the west fighting the Imperial Empire in the east over Reignite, the magic rocks this world's technology runs on. This is known as the Second European War, essentially a stand-in for World War II. In the middle of this conflict was the neutral country of Gallia, which had great deposits of Reignite, and thus the Imperials invaded it for its resources. You played as Vulcan Gunther and fought them off, while also discovering the truth behind the mysterious Valkyrie, who according to legend brought peace to the land ages ago after defeating the Darkson people. The Darksons being a dark-haired ethnic group who were stripped of their last names as punishment for their ancient crimes, and are still super persecuted today. So with this context, in Valkyria Chronicles 3, you play as Kurt Irving, an up-and-coming soldier fighting for Gallia against the forces of the Empire. He's a great tactician and seems like he's in for a promising military career, until a superior officer suspects he may have discovered his backroom dealings and thus charges him with treason in hopes of getting rid of him. Kurt is placed in charge of the 422nd Squad, a penal regiment consisting of criminals and problem soldiers. The members of this squad are basically expected to die, and are stripped of their names, only being allowed to call each other by their number, hence the nickname, the Nameless. They're an off-the-record detachment who must do any order they're given on threat of execution. This includes suicide missions, covert ops, or even just literal war crimes the Gallia Army can deny being involved with. All credit for their work also goes to the regular army, who treats them as garbage. But Kurt is optimistic and determined to have himself and the rest of the Nameless survive, with the goal of achieving amnesty through their deeds. All the while they'll be dealing with the rival special forces of the Empire, Calamity Raven, a unit consisting of Darksons fighting to gain favor for change and independence. While the Darksons are normally treated like trash everywhere else, they're basically subhuman to the Empire. So we have the outcasts of both armies fighting each other, each hoping that one day they can live in peace. Funny enough, while the race war was actually the plot of Valkyria Chronicles 2, it's much more of a theme here and used for some very strong moments. The story here is great. Valkyria Chronicles 3 is known for being much darker than the other entries, and it deserves that reputation. There are some real moments here that sting as the nameless keep finding themselves in worse situations. On top of that, we have some good characters. Kurt is distinct as a protagonist. He's more methodical and calculating, but still kind of a lovable dork at times with his candy eating habit or spice addiction. You get to see him build trust with the squad and react to the bad scenarios the game throws at him. Accompanying him are Riella and Imka, two standout soldiers of the squad and also the game's love interests. Don't worry though, this is no dating sim. You just sometimes get the rare choice of who to hang out with a nice scene that explores their characters. Riella is a bright, cheery type, eager to help, with a reputation of causing everyone in her squad to periodically die, with her as the only survivor. Imka, on the other hand, is a darksin, cold to everyone in the squad, doesn't talk much, is known as the best fighter, and only cares about the current mission and her personal goal of revenge. These two are written well, not as love interests, but as actual characters. They both go through real arcs in the story. It doesn't feel weird at all when they develop feelings for Kurt. Some games have a little trouble making that believable. I'd also be remiss not to mention Gooser, the big brother darks of the squad, who's the first to trust in Kurt, is largely the voice of reason, and the window used to explore the darks and plight. He gets a lot of good scenes with Calamity Raven, one of the best characters in the game. And speaking of, Calamity Raven's Leer Dahao is a wonderful antagonist. He's respectable, intelligent, he's fighting for a cause you can understand, his troops follow him without question and you can see why. He isn't just some cartoon villain with sinister motives. Even the supporting cast is better than you'd expect. The Nameless consists of a variety of members, although you'll find them to be generally less criminal than you'd expect, which I think would have been kinda cool. They each get their own personal side chapter to explore their character, but besides that, this game does something that I'm actually hard pressed to think of many other games like it doing. It keeps its supporting cast as actually supporting. If you play strategy RPGs, you may know what I mean when I say a lot of games will give you a roster of 20 characters, but only 4 of them really get dialogue. They'll talk to the chapter they join, and then they just forever sit on the bench in the background. While Valkyria Chronicles 3 consistently gives all your initial squad mates dialogue and input in cutscenes. It really feels like you're a squad of teammates that constantly work with each other, instead of just a unit of main characters and their silent followers. Alongside the supporting cast of the Nameless, we have a ton of cameos from games past. As this takes place alongside Valkyria Chronicles 1, you'll run into Welkin and Squad 7 for a few missions. You'll also battle the same generals of the Empire, and you'll even get to see younger versions of the cast from Valkyria Chronicles 2. Now I will say the game maybe spends a bit too much time with these cameos, like the first half of the game usually throws in a new one per chapter somewhere, but it's fun fan service. Besides its great story and characters, Valkyria Chronicles 3 does a good job of translating the original game's system to a portable console, although again, most of the credit should go to Valkyria Chronicles 2. This series implements what it calls the Blitz system. You take turns moving your units by spending command points, which can also be spent on orders and various effects. Once you've selected a unit, they can move and perform a single action, with attacking requiring you to aim your gun like a third-person shooter. Adding things like multiple character classes, tanks, interception fire, line of sight, and you have a very fun combat system that rewards good strategy. Tying this all together is the game's good presentation. Graphically, this looks very good for a PSP game. In-game models and environments look nice, with stages consisting of various settings from forests to deserts to caves to towns, but it's actually outside of combat that this game shows off. While cutscenes are just static portraits and boxes, the art team were really able to make them look good and replicate the watercolor style of the original. The stage-like screens are battle maps that actively change as missions progress, menus just look good in general, colors are more muted to match the grimmer tone of the game, and each chapter is bookended like an old-time war documentary. This game makes up for its lower fidelity with style. Sound-wise, you get a lot of voice acting that I can't really judge the quality of, but at a glance the actors all sound like they do their jobs well. In terms of music, this is a great soundtrack. The same guy who did the music for the other games is back, once again giving us an orchestral military feel. Not to say they're the same though, as the tracks were designed to be more modern battle themed instead of fantasy, according to interviews. Either way, they sound great while still having their own feel. But back to the gameplay, as mentioned, the Blitz system combines strategy with accurate shooting skills. Headshots deal more damage, tanks have glowing radiator weak points, and attacking enemies from the side or back gives bonuses. You can even sometimes kill 2 enemies if you line them up with a multi-shot weapon. You have a handful of units on the field at once and a limited number of moves until it's the enemy's turn. Missions take place across several connected small maps linked to each other through specific bases. Now if you've only played the console Valkyria Chronicles games, these small maps might look like a downgrade compared to the singular large maps, but they honestly work really well. They inspire fighting on multiple fronts, or rushing one side to flank the enemy on another map. The goal in your turns isn't just to kill enemies though. Apart from capturing bases or destroying key targets, it's just as important to set up defensive measures. While damage is mainly done through direct attacks, you also need to account for interception fire. This happens whenever a unit is moving, causing anyone in range with the right weapon to begin firing. Walking towards a bunch of enemy soldiers with machine guns is sure to get you killed, but likewise, a forward fight position will make it hard for the enemy to approach you. There's also sandbags to crouch behind, which provide cover and reduce damage taken. Not so many strategy RPGs balance offensive and defensive tactics like this, and I think it's one of the franchise's strong points. At the start of each round, you get a certain amount of command points, with it costing 1 to move and act with the unit. These can be used as many times as you want, the only penalty being reduced movement every time until the next round. So if you place someone in a spot where they can take down 3 enemies, you can spend 3 command points to do just that. You also have your tank, which can basically ignore interception fire and decimate your enemies depending on how you equip it. They actually changed how it works in this game, as before moving the tank would cost 2 command points, but it's only 1 here in exchange for having limited ammo. Also, if you don't want to use all your command points, you can just end your turn early and save them to have extra for the next round. You can otherwise spend command points on orders, which can do things like boost stats, heal units, or reveal every enemy on the map. Introduced in this game is also SP, which doesn't refill between rounds. It can be used alongside a command point to activate a special skill from one of the 3 main characters. The first one you'll get is Kurtz, and his shows off his role as a leader by allowing him to team up with 2 other units, move as a group, and fire upon a single enemy. Useful for both offense and just for maneuvering units that can't walk that far, or getting them part way through interception fire. I love the addition of these skills, defining the powerhouses of the squad as such through gameplay, as well as giving you another valuable tactic to consider. But with all this talk about units, I haven't mentioned the classes yet. You start out with 5, but will unlock 3 more as the game progresses. First off, we have Scouts, who can move the farthest, deal decent damage with headshots using their high accuracy rifles, and carry grenades for extra oomph. In exchange, they can't take many hits, but they're great for capturing bases with their mobility. Next we have Shock Troopers, who give up their movement for defense and a machine gun that'll kill most infantry in one go. Lancers wield this world's equivalent of a rocket launcher and are used to deal with enemy armor. Engineers are similar to Scouts, but are more adept at healing fallen units or repairing your tank. Then we have the Armored Tech, a melee class that can approach gunfire safely with their shields and disarm landmines. Also, when their turn ends, their shield extends into a wall that can protect themselves and other units. You'll later get access to the Sniper class, for example, and together, these classes each perform their own important roles. Some are more useful than others for sure, but they each have a purpose. Speaking of classes, where before characters were set to a single class, this game allows them to change to any of them. Now, I'm generally not a fan of systems like this, as I find the class to be part of the character, but they do something kinda cool here. While each character can be any class, they all have preferred classes which grant them bonuses to their stats. So in a way, they still have defined roles that suit the characters while still giving the player freedom. Aside from class preferences, each character also has potentials, both unique and class specific. Potentials are essentially personality traits that translate to boosted stats during combat. If a character likes being outside, they may get an accuracy boost on a forest map. Consequently, a character that gets lonely easily may get a defense penalty when not near ally units. No idea how liking cooking translates to a stat boost, but it can. Potentials can be positive or negative, and they're a genius way to characterize your units and their personalities through gameplay. Each character's personal missions and growth will also manifest their development as a new potential. They'll also get potential specific to their class, gaining a new one as they level the class up. There's also this extensive potential tree that looks very intimidating, but it's just an overly complex way of showing the different class potentials, and that having 2 potentials from different classes can result in a powerful combination ability. Leveling up actually works a bit differently in this game. When you beat a level, you gain money experience based on your performance, and then each unit will gain class experience based on their individual actions. When they get enough, they promote up to 2 ranks, giving them more stats and maybe access to new equipment. The experience you get from battles is actually spent on raising the stats of all your units at once. You can invest in max health, accuracy, damage against armored units, or sometimes you can spend it on learning a new order. Previously you leveled up whole classes and turned them into advanced forms at certain thresholds, but I think this new system works well enough. Money, meanwhile, is spent on weapons and the tank. You'll gradually upgrade your guns as you play, also speccing into variations that may sacrifice damage for more accuracy. You can also get special weapons by killing ace enemy units during levels. They also add accessories to this game, which you can use to boost specific stats if you want a unit to deal a bit more damage or have better evasion. Then we have the tank, which is way more customizable. Technically speaking, it might not even be one, as aside from making a lighter or heavier tank, you can make it an armored personnel carrier to transport units. You have the choice of body type, different turrets that provide different weapon types, extra armor, attachments to deal with weather effects or terrain, all done through an easy to understand weight system. Switching to more miscellaneous points, I didn't have to ever grind in this game. You get the rare side mission to tackle for extra XP, but between all the main missions and character missions, I never found myself having to repeat them to get stronger. I also didn't find myself feeling too powerful just breezing through levels without thought. The game's overall very well paced and balanced from my experience. Even the story to gameplay ratio is well paced. I also love how some of the side missions are given in-world context, like taking down an enemy mortar facility, and they'll actually deactivate the enemy mortar in the story mission if you do it. It's really cool. There's no permadeath, although the second game did away with it first. Another thing it covers from 2 is not failing a mission when your tank or commanding unit dies. This allows you to employ more aggressive strategies without keeping a strong unit in the back so they don't die from a focused assault. I think the environmental effects could be a fun change sometimes. Depending on the map, you'll get less movement or you won't be able to see units until they're very close. I think they mixed up the combat without being too grating. They also help to keep the maps a little more interesting, as instead of custom maps per stage like the original game, Valkyria Chronicles 3 reuses its maps constantly. Now they do change up starting positions and enemy placement to keep it different, but the map reuse is a little dull. But to get that excitement back up, this game has a fun take on boss battles. Boss battles in the original game were generally either puzzles or tanks with a lot of health. In all honesty, not its strong point. Here, they have some similar ones with extra strong tanks or units, but my favorite style of boss is the Calamity Raven squad. Tying together the story and gameplay, Calamity Raven aren't just an elite squad in your rival in name, their stages also kind of act like boss fights just by beating normal stages with tougher and more aggressive enemies. It sounds simple, but it really makes them feel like a threat whenever they show up. I think it works well with this style of game compared to just a normal level with an extra strong tank at the end. In summary, Valkyria Chronicles 3 is a wonderful game. Its story and characters are well told and compelling, its graphics have style, it's got good music, and its gameplay takes what did and didn't work from the second game and refines it into a good blend of strategy RPG and shooting elements. I was skeptical at first, but I can see why some people put this above the original Valkyria Chronicles. It's a real shame it wasn't brought over to other countries, as I'm sure if it got more exposure, it would be fondly remembered. So if you're a fan of Valkyria Chronicles who hasn't played this entry, you're looking for a great strategy RPG to play with a good story, or you just want to check out one of the best games on the PSP, go play Valkyria Chronicles 3. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you liked it for some weird reason, consider leaving a like or comment. If you didn't like it, well, leave a comment anyways about what I did wrong. If you want to hear about more games I think are neat, or whatever random thing I end up making videos on, maybe also think about subscribing. Whatever you choose to do, I hope you have a nice day.